At her sister's wedding, my wife watched me get turned away at the gate. "He's not on the list." She smirked. I turned and walked. 3 days later, $42,000 vanished from our account. I stood outside the ornate wrought iron gate of the Ocean View Resort, clutching a gift box wrapped in silver paper and tied with a blue ribbon. 5 years of marriage, and somehow I'd become a stranger at my sister-in-law's wedding. The security guard in his crisp black suit and dark sunglasses scanned his tablet with practiced indifference. "I'm sorry, sir. Your name isn't on the list." His voice carried the rehearsed certainty of someone who'd delivered this line countless times before. "This event is for confirmed guests only. There must be some mistake," I said, pulling out my phone. My wife sent me the confirmation email last week. I showed him the screen, maintaining the calm demeanor that had become my signature in both boardroom negotiations and family gatherings. He barely glanced at it. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harris. I have strict instructions. If you're not on this list, I can't let you in." The weight of the vintage watch in the gift box suddenly felt heavier. $1,200 for a timepiece that Emily, my sister-in-law, would never receive. I'd spent weeks hunting it down, knowing her passion for antiques. That's when I saw them through the gate. Courtney and her mother Linda, standing near a marble fountain, both in elegant dresses, champagne flutes in hand, laughing as if they didn't have a care in the world. The afternoon sun caught the diamonds on Linda's wrist as she gestured animatedly. Courtney looked over and saw me. There was no shock in her eyes, no embarrassment, not even the decency to pretend surprise. She simply leaned toward her mother, whispered something, and they both erupted in laughter before turning away. That look in my wife's eyes, it wasn't confusion or regret. It was triumph. I didn't make a scene. 5 years in the tech world, and a lifetime of being the rational one had taught me the value of dignity and humiliation. I simply turned and walked back to my car. The gift box clutched so tightly the handle left marks on my palm. In the driver's seat, I sat immobile for 15 minutes, eyes fixed on the resort entrance, hands trembling on the steering wheel. I checked my phone again, rereading Courtney's message from 3 days ago. "Emily's wedding might be a bit restrictive. Mom says we should only invite immediate family." I had replied with 2 simple words. "I understand." What a fool I'd been. I'd validated my own exclusion. As I was about to drive away, a tall man in a gray suit and sunglasses emerged from the main entrance. He approached Courtney from behind, placing a familiar hand on her shoulder. They exchanged words, and she laughed that full-throated laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in months. Then she glanced toward my car one last time. In that moment, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the realization that I'd been living with a stranger who wore my wife's face. I started the engine, but as I pulled away, something nagged at me. The man had a tattoo on his wrist, a sequence of numbers partially visible beneath his watch. I was certain I'd seen that tattoo before, but couldn't place where the startup I co-founded specialized in cybersecurity. I'd built my career on noticing details others missed. And something about those numbers felt important. A digital fingerprint I'd encountered somewhere before. As I drove back to our empty house, the one I'd helped buy after securing a loan that saved Linda from financial ruin, I realized that today wasn't just about being excluded from a wedding. It was about watching my wife choose sides in plain sight. It was about standing alone outside while a 5-year marriage crumbled behind a gate I wasn't allowed to pass through. And somewhere in those numbers on a stranger's wrist was a clue to why I lay motionless in our bed at 2 a.m., listening to the faint click of the front door. Courtney was finally home. The wedding reception had ended hours ago. My eyes remained closed, but every sense was on high alert as I tracked her movements through our house. The soft pad of bare feet across hardwood heels dangling from her fingertips. She moved with the careful stealth of someone avoiding detection. In the bathroom, water ran for precisely 3 minutes, just enough to wash away makeup, not enough for a proper shower. When she finally slipped into bed, she kept to her edge, back turned to me. No whispered explanation, no acknowledgement of what had happened at the gate. Just the shallow breathing of someone pretending to sleep. I wondered who she'd been with. The man with the numbered tattoo, most likely. His familiar gesture on her shoulder suggested this wasn't their first encounter. Morning arrived with its own bizarre performance. I walked into our kitchen to find Courtney in a pale blue nightgown, making toast and brewing coffee. Soft jazz played from the Bluetooth speaker. She smiled when she saw me reaching up to place a quick kiss on my cheek. "Sleep well?" she asked, as if yesterday had never happened. As if I hadn't been humiliated and rejected at a family event while she watched and laughed. "Fine." I replied, the word falling between us like a stone. She continued her domestic choreography, spreading jam on toast, pouring coffee into the mug she'd bought me last Christmas. Emily looked beautiful, didn't she? The ceremony was perfect. I studied her face for any crack in the facade, any hint of acknowledgement. There was nothing. Not once did she ask, "Were you okay at the wedding?" or "Did something happen at the entrance?" The most obvious questions, the ones any innocent person would ask, never materialized. 2 days passed in this surreal dance of normalcy. I went to work, ran my company, held meetings with clients. On the outside, I was Joel Harris, co-founder of NetGuard Security, the reliable guy who always had solutions. Inside, I was calculating, watching, waiting. I was in the middle of our quarterly security review when Megan from reception buzzed through. "Joel, your wife and her mother are here. They say it's urgent." Before I could respond, the door swung open. Courtney burst in, eyes puffy and red mascara smudged beneath them. Linda followed, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. The performance was almost admirable if I hadn't already seen through the curtain. "What's happened?" I asked, not rising from my chair. I gestured toward the seats across from my desk. "It's Dax," Courtney said, her voice breaking as she collapsed into the chair. "He's missing. No one's heard from him since the wedding." Linda stepped in, her voice carrying that familiar tone of controlled crisis. "He's Courtney's friend, a personal trainer. He's been having some financial difficulties and we're worried something might have happened." I leaned back, fingers steepled beneath my chin. "And you're telling me this because—" Courtney reached across my desk, grasping my hand. Her eyes, despite the tears, held a calculated intensity. "You know how to track things, Joel, electronic footprints, phone signals. You could help us find where his signal disappeared." The pieces clicked into place with stunning clarity. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly, withdrawing my hand from hers. "You told me only family could attend the wedding, but your friend Dax was welcome." "It wasn't like that," Courtney said, her voice shifting to defensive. "He needed somewhere to go and I felt sorry for him. He's having a rough time." "I'm your husband," I said, my voice flat but precise. I was turned away at the gate like a delivery guy who showed up at the wrong address. "You saw me standing there, and you laughed. You said there wasn't room for me, but there was room for him." Something changed in Courtney's expression, a hardening, a dropping of pretense. "You don't understand," she snapped. "You're so boring, Joel. You've never made me feel alive." The words should have hurt, but instead they clarified. This wasn't disappointment anymore. This was seeing through to bone. Linda shifted into reconciliation mode. "We just want her to be happy," she said, her voice honey-coated poison. "And you, well, you don't contribute much beyond silence, do you?" I looked directly at her. This woman I'd helped save from financial ruin 3 years ago, when I'd personally guaranteed a loan for her failing business. "You're right, Linda. I have been silent. But I think it's time I started speaking up." After they left storming out when it became clear I wouldn't be their technical errand boy, I walked to our security room. My company had provided the access control system for Emily's wedding venue as a gift. Standard procedure meant we maintained backup logs. It took less than 5 minutes to find what I was looking for. There it was in the access records, Dax Keller, registered as an approved guest. And next to his name under authorized by was a signature I recognized immediately. Linda Mayfield. Not Courtney. Linda. I stared at the screen, a cold understanding washing over me. This wasn't just my wife's betrayal. This was coordinated. And whatever game they were playing, they'd just made a critical error. They'd come to me for help finding a man whose name was officially logged in a system I controlled. A system that proved they were lying. I printed the log and slipped it into my desk drawer. Then I started digging deeper into who exactly Dax Keller was and why his disappearance was suddenly worth this elaborate performance. I sat in my office long after Courtney and Linda had left, their performance still playing in my mind. The desperation in their voices had seemed genuine almost. But there had been no contrition in Courtney's eyes, no acknowledgement of what had happened at the wedding. Just a calculated attempt to manipulate me into becoming their personal search engine. I pulled up our text message history for the past 2 months, scanning for any mention of this supposedly close friend Dax. Nothing. Not a single reference until he had conveniently disappeared. For someone important enough to warrant a wedding invitation over her own husband, Dax Keller had been conspicuously absent from our conversations. Trust once broken doesn't shatter all at once. It splinters, revealing fault lines that had been there all along. I'd been blind to them, comfortable in my role as the steady provider, the quiet problem solver. But not anymore. I decided to conduct my own investigation. My company had designed security systems for several high-end hotel chains, including the Granford Regal downtown. We still maintained privileged access to their guest registration system for maintenance and security audits. It wasn't difficult to search for Dax Keller's digital footprint, except he wasn't registered as Dax Keller. He was listed as Preston Maddox, checked in the morning after the wedding. A quick cross-reference with our facial recognition database confirmed it was him. I accessed the security footage and watched as he exited the hotel at 6:42 a.m., rolling a suitcase behind him. Baseball cap pulled low, sunglasses obscuring his face. He walked with purposeful strides, constantly checking over his shoulder. The unmistakable body language of someone on the run, but not someone who'd been abducted or was in danger. Someone escaping. The next morning, I positioned myself in the parking lot across from the Granford Regal at 6:30 a.m. A hunch told me he might return to retrieve something. People running always forget something. My patience was rewarded at 7:15 when a silver Audi pulled into the hotel's side entrance. Even with the cap and glasses, I recognized him immediately. I followed at a safe distance as he zigzagged through downtown traffic, making unpredictable turns and doubling back twice, evasion techniques that confirmed my suspicions. He stopped at a gas station, paid cash for cigarettes, then headed toward the industrial district. He pulled into an abandoned garage with a ramp leading to a subterranean level. After 30 minutes, with no sign of him emerging, I cautiously approached the building. The garage was empty. A quick sweep revealed a rear exit that connected to an alley leading to a parallel street. Dax had vanished. But one thing was clear. He was experienced at disappearing acts. I needed professional help. Through my attorney, I contacted Victor Slade, ex-cop turned private investigator, a man with a reputation for finding people who didn't want to be found. We met at a coffee shop in a quiet part of town, the kind of place that still used cash registers and had no security cameras. Victor was in his mid-40s with a weathered face and eyes that missed nothing. I laid out everything I had photos of. Dax's suspicious conversations, bank statements showing unusual transfers from our joint account, and the security footage from the Granford 5 days. Was all he said after reviewing the materials. Check your secure email daily. While waiting for Victor's findings, I conducted my own search at home. In our bedroom, safe behind our marriage certificate and property deeds, I discovered a USB drive I'd never seen before. My hands trembled slightly as I plugged it into my laptop. The drive contained 6 video files, all shot on a smartphone, each helpfully labeled with dates and locations. The first video showed Courtney laughing in what appeared to be a hotel room. "He's such a good provider," her voice dripped with mockery. "My safe investment, a walking wallet." Another video showed her wearing one of my shirts, sitting cross-legged on an unfamiliar bed, champagne glass in hand. "He'll cry like a baby when he finds out," she told whoever was filming. "But that just makes it easier to take everything." The camera then turned, revealing Dax's reflection in a mirror, shirtless, the tattoo of numbers clearly visible on his wrist. My stomach churned, but I forced myself to continue my investigation. I extracted data from our joint bank statements for the past year, tracking a pattern of regular transfers to a company called Everglass Consulting LLC. The amounts varied: $2,000 here, $3,500 there, totaling nearly $42,000. A deep search revealed Everglass had no valid tax ID number. Its registered address was a mailbox in Jacksonville, Florida, a classic sign of a shell company. The listed representative was one Ronald Pierce, but the driver's license scan and the registration documents clearly showed Dax Keller's face. I was married to a stranger who had been systematically draining our accounts, but Courtney wasn't working alone. I pulled up the wedding guest authorization form from our security system. There was Linda's elegant signature personally vouching for Dax Keller's admission to the exclusive event. Further digging uncovered footage from our home security system 3 months earlier. Linda sitting on our patio phone to her ear. He needs to disappear after making the withdrawal, and she can't waver on this. A pause then. What about her idiot husband? He still thinks he's the perfect son-in-law. My phone rang, cutting through the silence of my office. Victor's number. I've got something you need to see firsthand. His voice was tense. Dax isn't just scamming you. He's been accused by 3 other women of setting up fake companies and vanishing with their money. I gripped the phone tighter, and the legal guarantor for his businesses in all 3 cases, Linda Mayfield. The final piece clicked into place. This wasn't just my wife having an affair. This wasn't even just financial fraud. This was a coordinated, practiced scheme with Linda at the center. How quickly can you meet? I asked. 1 hour. Same place. Bring a copy of your prenup. As I gathered my files, a new determination settled over me. The quiet, accommodating Joel Harris was gone. In his place stood someone they hadn't counted on. A man with nothing left to lose and the technical skills to unravel their entire operation. They'd made one critical error in their calculation. They'd assumed my silence meant weakness. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Victor's revelation about Linda Mayfield's involvement transformed my approach entirely. I no longer felt the burning rage of betrayal that had crystallized into something colder and more focused. I wasn't going to confront them or demand explanations. I was going to dismantle their entire operation. I met with my attorney Rebecca Chen at her downtown office the next morning. Her reputation for handling high-stakes divorces with surgical precision was well earned. I laid out everything: the videos, the financial trails, Victor's findings, and Linda's orchestration. They've been methodical, Rebecca said, reviewing the evidence. But they made one critical error. What's that? They left too many fingerprints, digital and otherwise, and they severely underestimated you. She looked up from the documents. How do you want to proceed? Total separation. I replied, financial, legal, personal. Rebecca nodded and outlined our strategy. Freeze all joint accounts, immediately transfer my personal funds to corporate holdings inaccessible in divorce proceedings, and prepare divorce papers with irrefutable evidence of infidelity, financial fraud, and conspiracy. And Joel, she added, you need to move out today. Hotel, not apartment. Nothing with your name on a lease. By evening, I had transferred ownership of my car to my company, changed the locks and security codes at my office, and instructed HR to revoke Courtney's visitor access. I opened a new bank account at a different institution, using my business address for all correspondence. The next phase required patience and acting skills I didn't know I possessed. I sent Courtney a carefully crafted text. I need you. I think we can still fix this. Her response came quickly. I want that too. We shouldn't let Dax come between us anymore. Perfect, I followed up. I want to see you talk things through completely. For the next 2 days, I maintained the charade while Victor kept surveillance on a property registered to Samantha Weiler, an alias we'd traced to Courtney through utility records. On the second afternoon, Victor sent me photographs of Courtney embracing Dax at the doorway of the apartment. They were laughing completely at ease, unaware they were being documented. I was staying at the Hamilton Hotel downtown when Courtney showed up unannounced. The front desk called to warn me she was on her way up. I placed the divorce papers on the table, a thick folder containing every piece of evidence organized chronologically. She burst in, eyes wild with fabricated indignation. You've been ignoring my calls. What game are you playing? I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit down, Courtney. Don't tell me what to... Sit down. Something in my tone stopped her cold. She sank into the chair, her gaze falling on the folder. What's that? I slid it toward her. Everything you don't want me to know. As she flipped through the pages, Bank statements, screenshots, photographs, transcripts. Her performance cycled through shock denial and finally desperate anger. "You went through my personal things," she cried, feigning violation. "You spied on me. You were planning to destroy my life." I replied evenly, "Did you expect me to thank you for it?" She lunged forward, hand raised to slap me. I caught her wrist mid-air, holding it firmly but not enough to hurt. "I loved a mask," I said quietly, "not anymore." Her mask did slip, then just for a moment. Behind the tears, I saw calculation. The rapid assessment of a predator realizing its prey had grown teeth. "What do you want?" she asked. "Nothing from you. Ever again." What I didn't tell her was that identical copies of the evidence had already been sent to multiple destinations. The family court handling our divorce filing the IRS fraud division regarding Everglass Consulting's tax evasion, and her employer complete with video clips of her mocking clients and disclosing confidential information. I'd also forwarded Linda's incriminating recordings to the State Banking Commission detailing her pattern of guaranteeing fraudulent businesses. Courtney left the hotel room in tears, real ones this time. Not from remorse, but from the dawning realization that her carefully constructed scheme was collapsing around her. That evening, while reviewing case notes with Victor in my hotel room, the front desk called a courier had delivered an envelope requiring my signature. Inside was a stack of bank documents, detailed account information for Everglass Consulting, LLC. There listed as co-owners were the names Linda Mayfield and Courtney Mayfield, not just accomplices but architects of the entire operation. "This is from my source inside the bank." Victor explained they weren't just helping Dax. The three of them have been running this scheme together for years. Linda's the financier, Courtney's the honey trap, and Dax is the front man who takes the fall if things go south. I stared at the documents, a strange calm settling over me. "How many others?" "At least 4 men before you," Victor said. "All successful professionals, all left with significantly diminished assets after their divorces." I had thought I was fighting to save what remained of my dignity and finances. Now I understood I was dismantling a criminal enterprise, one that had perfected the art of legal theft through marriage, and they had chosen the wrong mark this time. Armed with the bank documents proving Courtney and Linda were co-owners of Everglass Consulting, I transitioned from defensive countermeasures to an orchestrated offensive. Victor's revelation about their history of targeting successful professionals made this more than just my personal fight. It was about stopping a predatory operation. I compiled detailed dossiers on their scheme and sent them to multiple authorities. The IRS received documentation of tax evasion and money laundering. The SEC got evidence of their fraudulent investment activities through shell companies. And the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit received a comprehensive package detailing their interstate fraud conspiracy. "Your timing couldn't be better," Rebecca told me over a secure line. "The Banking Commission has been building a case against similar operations. Your evidence provides the missing links they needed." Meanwhile, Victor had been quietly tracking Dax after our garage encounter. During our surveillance, I'd managed to slip a small tracking device into the keychain he'd left on a cafe table while taking a call. Old-school tactics sometimes trump digital ones. 3 days later, Victor called with news. "We've got him." Suburban motel outside Phoenix registered under the name Thomas Grant. Within hours, federal agents raided the motel room. They found Dax with 7 different SIM cards, 3 encrypted laptops, and over $75,000 in cash. According to Victor's contact in law enforcement, Dax had been frantically trying to reach Courtney before his arrest, but his calls weren't connecting. That's because I'd already arranged for her phone service to be suspended through a court order. Tied to the fraud investigation, Courtney received her own surprise the following morning, a formal summons for questioning by federal investigators. The financial records linking her to Dax, the ownership documents for the Samantha Weiler apartment, and emails discussing fund transfers had triggered a cascade of legal consequences. She was charged as an accomplice in fraud and money laundering operations. Her employer placed her on immediate administrative leave. Our joint assets were frozen pending investigation into their origins. She bombarded me with messages, first pleading, then threatening, then begging again. She offered to destroy evidence, claimed she'd been manipulated. Swore she could explain everything if we could just talk in person. I never responded. Not once Linda's fall was particularly satisfying. The woman who had looked down on me as the IT boy, unworthy of her daughter, now faced her own reckoning. Banking records showed she had personally guaranteed loans for Everglass with Dax listed as her financial advisor in the documentation. What she hadn't counted on was my knowledge of a previous financial impropriety. She'd committed one I'd helped cover up 3 years ago by providing funds to make the affected investors whole. That case was now reopened, establishing a pattern of behavior that devastated her carefully cultivated reputation. The board of directors at her investment firm voted unanimously to remove her and freeze her equity stake until legal proceedings concluded. The society pages that once celebrated her philanthropy now carried headlines about her alleged financial crimes, but Courtney's collapse was the most complete. Internal videos from her workplace showing her mocking clients and misusing company accounts somehow leaked online. I didn't ask Victor how he obtained them. Some questions are better left unasked. The media coverage was merciless. Mayfield scam trended for days as journalists uncovered more details about their operation. Her glamorous friends disappeared overnight. Even Emily, the sister whose wedding had been the site of my humiliation, publicly denounced Courtney as the poison that infected our family. There was one final move I needed to make. I sent Linda's most damning recording where she called me naive and boasted about manipulating me to the one person Courtney still respected, her grandmother, Eleanor. Eleanor's response was a single line, "You have destroyed our family's bloodline with your arrogance." Coming from the formidable matriarch who had built the Mayfield fortune from nothing, it was a devastating verdict. The final confrontation came at the court-mandated mediation session. Courtney entered the room like a ghost of her former self, pale, unmade, with dark circles shadowing her eyes. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. Gone was the mask of innocence. "You've won, Joel," she said, her voice hollow. "Happy now?" "I didn't win anything," I replied evenly. "I just refused to be devoured like a fool." She looked at me, and for a brief moment, I saw something that might have been genuine emotion. "You know, I did love you some small part of me. That part died when you turned me away from a family celebration to make room for a con artist." The mediation was brief, with federal charges pending. Courtney had no leverage. The divorce was finalized with terms entirely in my favor. As I walked out of the courthouse, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Linda still has one card unplayed. Watch out for Jenna Faulkner." I showed the message to Victor, who was waiting by the car. "Could be Dax trying to create chaos," he said, "or someone else entirely." "Either way," I replied, "I'm not finished being vigilant." I had dismantled their operation, but I'd learned the hard way that underestimating enemies leads to destruction. Whoever Jenna Faulkner was, I'd be ready. The quiet, trusting Joel Harris they'd targeted no longer existed. In his place stood someone they never saw coming, a man who had learned to see through masks, even beautiful ones. I moved into a minimalist loft in Santa Monica a week after the court mediation. The warning about Jenna Faulkner remained in the back of my mind, but I refused to let paranoia dictate my recovery. Instead, I methodically erased every trace of my former life. First came a new phone number known only to a select few. Then I sold my BMW, the one Courtney had always complained was too understated for someone of your position, and bought a simple charcoal Audi with no personalized plates or identifying features. I changed every password, security question, and digital access point tied to my old life I wasn't running. I was removing potential vectors of attack. The first few nights alone were brutal. Sleep evaded me as my mind replayed every moment, searching for signs I should have seen earlier. But gradually, night by night, the silence transformed from oppressive to peaceful. Without the constant performance of a fake marriage, I rediscovered what genuine solitude felt like. I returned to street photography, a passion I'd abandoned during my marriage after Courtney called it pedestrian at a dinner party. With my camera, I captured honest moments between strangers, a father teaching his daughter to ride a bike, an elderly couple holding weathered hands, a food vendor's pride in his craft. Authenticity called to me like a beacon. Under the pseudonym Phoenix, I started a blog chronicling my journey from betrayal to rebuilding. I never mentioned names or specific details that could identify anyone involved, focusing instead on the emotional landscape of recovery. To my surprise, readership grew rapidly. Comments poured in from others who had experienced similar betrayals. "How did you know exactly what the 3 a.m. thoughts feel like?" One reader asked, "I didn't write for validation or exposure. I wrote because truth, even painful truth, had become precious to me." 3 months after the divorce, my friend Marcus invited me to a small gathering at his beachfront home. I almost declined, but Victor had verified that none of my ex-wife's social circle would be present. Still wary of crowds, I spent most of the evening on the quiet patio watching the ocean. "Too loud in there for you too?" a voice asked. She stood in the doorway holding a sparkling water. Shoulder-length auburn hair, minimal makeup, intelligent eyes that held mine without demand or expectation. "I reached my small talk quota about 20 minutes ago," I replied. She laughed. I maxed out when someone asked what my abundance mindset was. We introduced ourselves, Jenna Faulkner, the name from the mysterious text. My body tensed, but I maintained my composure while quickly texting Victor under the table. She was an art therapist who worked with children suffering from PTSD. When the conversation drifted toward personal histories, she didn't probe about my divorce, which Marcus had undoubtedly mentioned. Instead, she simply said, "Whoever makes it through the dark always carries some light with them." We exchanged numbers with no promises or expectations. Victor's background check revealed nothing suspicious. She was exactly who she claimed to be, with no connections to Linda or Courtney. The warning text, he concluded, was likely meant to keep me isolated and paranoid. Weeks later, I invited her to lunch. We didn't hide our scars or pretend to be undamaged. There was something refreshing about that honesty. One evening at my apartment, Jenna accidentally brushed against the small safe built into my bookshelf. I flinched instinctively, and she noticed. She didn't speak of it that night. The next morning, she left a note. "If you need to keep things locked away, I respect that. I just don't want to be locked away from who you really are." That evening, I opened the safe for the first time since moving. It was empty except for one USB drive, the one containing Courtney's recordings that had kept me awake that first night of discovery. "Keep this for me," I told Jenna, handing it to her, "so I don't have to look at it anymore." She understood what that meant. A formal letter arrived from the court. Courtney had accepted the divorce settlement without contesting any terms, making no claims to assets or support payments. She was serving 6 months of probation, completing community service, and undergoing mandatory therapy for what psychologists had diagnosed as borderline personality disorder with manipulative behavioral patterns. Linda's downfall was even more complete. Forced out of all investment boards, stripped of management positions she now faced, expanded investigation into 2 money laundering cases from 12 years earlier. Through Victor, I obtained an internal Everglass financial report from Dax's laptop trash folder. It detailed contingency plans, including one specifically about me. If Joel becomes suspicious, Plan B is to force him into psychological treatment by provoking unstable reactions. They had planned to gaslight me into doubting my own sanity if I'd caught on too soon. One morning, walking alone on the beach, my phone notified me of a physical letter delivered to my P.O. box. It was from Courtney. Handwriting unsteady, paper expensive as always. "You were the only person who was ever genuinely kind to me, and I threw it away. I'm sorry, but I know you don't need to hear that." I burned it on the beach. Not from hatred, but because I'd finally learned not to preserve things that no longer held value. Later that afternoon, Jenna joined me for a walk along the same stretch of sand. We didn't hold hands or perform affection. We simply walked comfortable in each other's presence. She gazed out at the ocean. Sometimes the waves take things away, not to steal them, but to clear space for what needs to come next. I nodded, feeling the truth of her words. The darkness that had followed me like a shadow was gone. The questions that had once consumed my thoughts were answered. What remained was light after the storm this time, a light of my own making. The betrayal had torn away everything I thought defined me. But in that space, I'd discovered something more valuable, a self that couldn't be taken, manipulated, or destroyed. and that was a freedom worth everything it had cost to find.